And we're live. Welcome to the Slightly Smarter podcast. My name is Rishav Das. Normally, I'd be joined by Ryan Teo, but again, he's ill this time, but he'll be here soon, hopefully. Very much missing him so far. But what we're doing, if you haven't heard or seen us before, is talking about what young people are thinking, what millennial thought. I've already fucked it.
Yeah, I saw that one coming.
Anyway, we're asking age-old questions to age young people to find out what young people are thinking today, what are their life philosophies, and what are their creative thought processes. This week, I'm joined by my dear friend, Charlie Wilson. We went to school together, and we're talking about everything from his story and then a few questions later down the line. Charlie, before we get on to all of that, what's your story?
Ooh, good question. Well, my story is a fairly simple one in my mind anyway. I was born in Singapore. I lived there for the first 18 years of my life, which is why I met Rishav here. And then at the end of A-levels, I moved back to the UK for university, in which I am in my third year of a law degree. And that is my story so far.
I like the so far because it's actually an interesting thing that we do, which is interview people who haven't yet completed their story, just on their way, in fact, beginning it. And speaking of beginnings, before we began this podcast, we were talking about kind of your upbringing, right? And the way that your story was influenced by how your parents decided to bring you up. Now, to give you some background as to why I asked that question, Charlie and I grew up in what you would term as an expat lifestyle. Did your parents follow that? How did they bring you up, and what did you make of it?
Well, to define the idea of an expat lifestyle is, a little bit difficult. But we went to a British international school, so obviously, we weren't entirely integrated into, the local country, But what I think my parents did slightly differently was not make it too easy in the way that, they would pay the way for everything I wanted to do when I wanted to do it and whatever I wanted to do. And I think, that slightly bit of reserved nature and the holding back, certain things, which, is what the general idea of what parents, should do, is just don't spoil your kids, was just so valuable because, it helps people to go forth, take on the challenges themselves, and sort of, it's the idea of self-improvement, self-betterment, and that is fueled by the restrictions. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you should say that because, well, like you look at Warren Buffett, right? Sometimes the richest man on the planet, other days not. His children, they don't really get a lot of his money, if anything, right? They haven't been able to leech off his income, and he still, drives the same car that he drove 20 years ago. He still lives in the same house that he bought 20 years ago. Really the question that I have in my mind is, you've got all of these rich, crazy rich families, and they're going to have kids, and you wonder, are those kids going to be successful if they've grown up just in money?
Well, this is an area where generalizations, can really easily be made. You could say, oh, for the kids of rich parents which weren't given all the money from, day one will succeed, or the kids which were given all the money will fail, but you can't generalize. I think, though, on a whole, the idea of not making it too easy for your kids is important. If you make it in such a way that, not just money, but if these parents, who are such successful businessmen and women, were to then offer their kids, a straight path into their, the family-run business, where it's the idea that the kid doesn't need to become, academically amazing. They don't have to do very well in their education system. They understand that they have a future lined up for them. It's sort of it can sort of hinder the learning process, I think.
But that's on the assumption that you have to have successful academics in order to be a successful person. Is that true?
Oh, yes. Well, actually, no. You called me out on that one. That is true. Forgive me, but what I was thinking was, when you brought up Warren Buffett, I was thinking along those sort of lines. Very, very conventional business terms. But obviously,
when you think about education, the way that my dad's always phrased it is, it doesn't matter where you go to in terms of uni or school or whatever, The only change is, I mean, everyone's climbing the same ladder. You just end up at a higher rung. It's not to say that anyone who's had less privilege than you educationally is going to be at any sort of disadvantage. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all striving for the same thing. The question, I guess, is ultimately, what are we all striving for? Let's assume for this conversation that it's money, but it could be anything, right? And if it's,
yes,
I mean, like, what are you striving for? Big question.
I'm not too money orientated actually. I'm more just for a contented lifestyle.
Yeah. You told me. So we had a discussion like 2 years ago, and Charlie comes up to me. He's like, well, obviously he doesn't come up to me and then just randomly shout at me, but he says, I'd like to live in the forests of Scotland. Describe that. Why? Why?
Well, it's that age-old thing where everyone's like, I'm done with this modern world. I just want to retire into solitary confinement sort of thing. But my thing was, the idea of just living a slower life. One where you sort of choose your own routine. Because every day, not every country, but a lot of countries nowadays, you have this routine where it's 9 to 5. Everyone, this is what causes all the rush hours, and that sort of controlled life, where you don't really have much choice in what you do, is not fully appealing for me in some ways.
But is it good that we have those jobs? If everyone had the opportunity to create their own lifetime table, would the world even function?
No, that is a very fair point. And it's not for everyone. And so, I mean, like when I did come up to you and say it was more of a flight of fancy than anything substantial, I imagine. But no, it's always a thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I would love to be able to get away from this crazy technology, the world that we live in, right? And it's interesting that the fact that if you want to do that, you have to basically go on an expedition to some far place in the east, Like, oh, I'm taking an adventure to Ladakh because I want to get a technology, cleanse. And it's like, why do you have to go all the way to India just to get away from technology? And not even just any India, like the mountains, right?
Yeah.
But okay, continuing on, your parents brought you up in a certain way. Were they also, what kind of people were they to you? Do you look up to them? Do you follow their advice, or what is it?
As I imagine most kids would agree, as when I was younger, my sort of early teens and that, you'd have that rebellious stage where you don't really care too much about what they think.
Yeah.
But, looking back on it, it's different. I would definitely say I look up to them. They're both hardworking people. They've both built themselves up by their own hands, and that that in itself is something to respect. Not to leave out the fact that I'm one of 4 children. I'm the youngest of 4. And when you see maybe friends or family which are trying to raise a newborn baby, and you think of doing that 4 times over, it's dare I say it, nightmarish.
Yeah, I mean, that you bring up a really good point though, which is the fact that you don't want to listen to anything they have to say when they're saying it, and then a month later or even a couple of years later, you're like, oh, well, I guess they were right. You know what I mean? You wish they'd because they're right.
It's true, but it's something which I doubt any kids can ever admit to their parents.
Yeah, true. I'd never say this to my mom. And Mom, if you're listening, I still won't say it in person. I mean, to be fair, she's probably the only view we have right now.
Well, one view is better than none.
No, that's what they say. Okay, continuing on with the story. Obviously, your parents brought you up in a certain way. They also got you into swimming, similar to mine. Mine also got me into swimming. That's how we ended up becoming good friends. Talk about swimming. When did you get in, and why did you keep doing it until, well, we both quit roughly the same time for pretty much the same reasons, which is CBA. But how'd you get into it?
My experience of starting swimming was because my 3 older siblings all were doing swimming at the exact same club in Singapore. It was like the British club. And I was about the age of, I think, 5 or early 6. And, I fancied, when you see your older siblings do something, I was like, can I give that a go, Mom? And I just remember going along for the training session, the tryout, so to speak.
Yeah.
And little did I know that 1 hour-and-a-half session would then indenture me into 15 years of servitude. Well, I did. Yeah, I was continuing swimming until about the age of 18, probably 17, more accurate. So over a decade of constant swimming training followed up that one fateful day.
Yeah, I mean, it should be said to those who are listening, the fact that Charlie was actually pretty fucking good. Like we used to compete in like we had CSAC, right, which is Southeast Asia Swimming Competition, and well, CSAC swimming, right, Southeast Asia Sports. I don't know what the abbreviation's for. I don't think we ever did. I mean, we were involved in it for 5 years. I still don't know what it is, but so we used to do CSAC swimming. Charlie was in an age group. You were the youngest in the age group, and you still managed to come bronze because you beat Stefan.
Yeah, that was an interesting one, wasn't it?
And what is okay? So I'm really interested, and I was talking about discovering more about young people's life philosophy. I think a lot of your philosophy actually stems from what you think about when you're swimming. What's your pull philosophy when you're in a race? Run me through your thought process. Like, what are you thinking when you're getting onto that block?
I would say my thought process on the block and when I'm in the pool are completely different. The thoughts I'm having on the block is, you're readying up, you're glancing from side to side at the people next to you, and the thoughts it's a mad array. It's a cacophony of multiple voices. I'm not thinking straight, don't know what's happening. But it's the second the fingertips touch the water and you hear that slightly deafened note as your head goes under.
Yeah.
And it's all calm. You're just looking at the finish line, that's it.
Yeah.
And the thing which sorry to interrupt, but me and Rishav have spoken about this before, the idea of, for us in the sprinting races, the short distance 50 meters, how much of it was sort of mental and how much was physical.
Yeah.
And my argument was that it was far more mental ability than it was your physical ability from training.
Yeah, but when you think about it, like when you're in the pool, down underneath the water, I mean, half the time, I'm pretty sure my eyes are closed because I don't want to see where I am in the pool. I'm more concentrating on don't try to breathe, get to the other side and kick your legs like you've never kicked your legs before. And in your words, shit out your heart.
One of my lesser known quotes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, of all of the quotes you've ever said, that's probably one of the less kind of respectable ones, shall we say?
Yeah.
But when you when you're in the pool, because I remember you'd get onto the block and you would try and scare people off by staring down.
Well, it's mind games, isn't it?
Because I'm not as good a swimmer as Charlie, so I'd be on the other side watching with the rest of the team. Because Charlie, more often than not, would be the only one from Tanglin eligible to be able to swim in that race. So you do trials, you do heats, similar to the Olympics. You do heats, and then the best of the heats get selected for the rounds further on. And so Charlie would be selected, so it'd just be all of us waiting at the side. You could see him get onto the block, turn his head every single direction possible, just to try and lock eyes with someone else on the diving block to scare them.
Well, that's the thing, I had a very, very competitive nature, but I think it only ever came out was in swimming and sports. And even everyday life, I'm more of a chill out guy, whatever happens, happens. But the second I'm at a swimming event, it's I will not let this man beat me.
Yeah, completely. But okay, what would you take? Like, I don't want to sound like an interviewer, but what did you take away from swimming that you feel like you have used in your daily life, or just as a mentality that you've carried on?
Well, actually, I have a good answer for that, Rishav. I think the most important thing I took away from swimming was the bit I hated the most and the bit I found the most boring, which was the training. You have the glamour of the races, you have the heart beating, the sprint finish, everyone's cheering. But the thing which I really remember and I took away, which I can then apply for the rest of my life, is just the memory of just doing laps up and down for hours on end, multiple days a week, for months, for years. And it was the idea that, you'd have to stay mentally focused. You have to have something in here which keeps you, taking that extra stroke, kicking that extra kick just to get to the end of your set in the training session. And it's the mental fortitude, and not just that, but the ability to bear with boring situations that makes you understand in life that not everything has to be a roller coaster. There will be times in your life where maybe it goes a bit slower, maybe things don't progress as fast as you want them to progress, but that's not a problem. You just got to bear with it and make the most out of the smaller situations as well as the large ones.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, to go on further from there is the fact that we would we would train in different lanes. Like I said, I was not as good. But we would train in different lanes, and even within the lanes I was in, I would have people take over me. And you know how utterly demoralizing that is when you're swimming. So we had a coach called Dean, amazing guy. So he'd just be like, right, hit an 800 warm up. We just got into the pool, 600 meters in, I'm already tired. And it's like, you see, watch people go over you. But it's funny because when it came to the race, I actually clocked faster times than them for the 53. Right?
Yeah.
And that only goes to show, I think, and what it's meant to me in particular is the fact that, like you said, where you've just got to keep going. You just got to keep plowing through. But then when the tire hits the road, you perform. You know what I mean? That mental fortitude to be able to think positively about, okay, I'm getting in this pool, I'm going to bash this 50 meters, only stems from the fact that you've done 5,000 meters the week before. Yeah,
definitely. And it's not just that, it's the idea that, you can't let yourself be caught off guard in the lulls in life. If you find yourself in a lull, maybe you lose focus for a bit. During that lull, maybe a big opportunity might come by. And if you're still in that sort of mindset of sort of lazily going along with life day to day, you might miss that. And, once you miss it, maybe there won't be a second chance.
Well, yeah, and that's this. I mean, I guess we're young enough to be able to say that there will be another chance. That we'll always we'll get the opportunity.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, I'm only 20, so got a good few years ahead at least.
Yeah, well, we'd like to think so, right? But yeah, I mean, when you think about it like that, right? Do you ever would your personality be different had you not done swimming? Do you think you could have learned this stuff without swimming?
Possibly. I mean, swimming was, it's a different sport in the way that, the training's a bit different to maybe other sports. But no, I think swimming or another sport equivalent would be, very important in forming who I am today. So yeah, I would have needed swimming to have the same mindset would be the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I do look at other sports and I see the benefit of them. I play hockey now at uni, and it's great to be involved in a team sport. It's all that camaraderie and this, that, and the other. But there's just nothing like an individual sport where the game is your game.
Yeah.
I mean, let it be said that my hockey skills are only bettered by my terrible swimming skills. So we can only just imagine how terrible I am at hockey. I mean, I didn't pick up a stick until the start of last year. So slowly but surely getting to a point where I can actually hit the ball because field hockey. But anyway, we had another thing that I think definitely defined the kind of person that you are, at least the way that I saw you, was the fact that you do read a lot and you have a specific genre that you're particularly interested in reading about.
Yeah. So for those who don't know me, my passion in life is the reading and study of history, or more precisely, military history. This started from a young age as well. It was mostly from my dad. He had these little history, Ladybird history books that he had from his childhood. And I found them when I was a kid. I got a bit interested because at the time I was just fascinated by the old styled the paintings in the books.
Yeah,
I looked at them more like picture books. But, as time went on, I started reading the words and I got interested. And yeah, that's another one of my foundation blocks of life, I'd imagine, for me personally, anyway.
Do you feel like you need to have read history to be able to progress in the future?
Not necessarily. I mean, as person who's passionate about history, I do believe having a basic understanding of certain historical events or just history in general is very important on your outlook on life or just your perception of the world around you. But I wouldn't say it is absolutely instrumental in going forward in life. It's something that would help you, improve your outlook, but I wouldn't say it's the only necessity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I personally haven't read a single history book in my life. I dropped history as soon as I could at school. I mean, I just had no desire to learn about what people had done in the past. But I think when I took history as a hobby rather than like a subject and an exam, that's when it becomes interesting. I don't necessarily look at history as something that I can learn from, but rather just the stuff that I can learn about.
Mm.
If you had to define, there's a bit of a nerdy question, define your favorite period in history, what would it be?
Ooh. Well, the period I keep going back to is the Dark Ages, although recently, historians aren't really calling it the Dark Ages anymore. It's more like the early medieval period. But let's go with the Dark Ages. And this period is the, roughly about 440 AD to 1066 AD.
Mm-hmm.
Between the fall of the Roman Empire, the fall of Rome itself, and the Norman invasion of England under William the Conqueror. That is probably my favorite time period.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why it was called the Dark Ages in the beginning was the idea that there was a very or acceptably low level of literacy, and so due to that, not many people were doing any records. There's very limited material you can learn from in that time period, and that was one of the reasons why it was called the Dark Period. Although they're finding out more information nowadays, so not quite so dark as we imagined.
But okay, I mean, when it comes to where you look back and you look at kind of ancient Egypt, you look at the Romans, they obviously, like you said, they wrote down a lot of what they did, but they were also thinking about interesting stuff. Like they were obviously concentrating on a lot of great philosophies that we still use today. They laid the foundation for mathematics and science and all of that. What were people doing during the Dark Ages? What did they make any big leaps in stuff that we would benefit from today?
I mean, there is the notable lack of, maths and science improvement during that time period. But I'd say I would most likely relate the that period of time into the time which not to focus in on a specific area in the world, but for Europe especially was when it gave the semblance to what the modern borders and countries would look like nowadays. It was the time when those countries started to look as they are now.
Yeah, and I still don't like. I was reading a book, or like reading an article rather. I should read more books, to be honest. But they were talking about the fact that a country is just an idea. The border is not really like it's not. No one. The world didn't come with walls. You know what I mean? How were those borders created? How were those countries formed?
To put it bluntly, I mean, back then it might have just been when enough men had died.
Mm-hmm.
When it was too costly to take an extra foot, an extra inch, or just where nature dictated, a river. They'd sometimes use that, just a very, very natural sort of border between two peoples. So that sort of question where why do we have nations and why are the borders where they are? It's due to innumerable factors, which could have been anything.
And you play like, so just stemming from this slight kind of different conversation, you play a lot of games like Rome Total War, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've moved on to different ones. For anyone who might know, Paradox Studios does a lot of grand strategy games, based around history, which are almost like.
I feel like those games have actually influenced the way that you probably think strategically, right? Would you have an argument for those who games to being smarter in terms of certain critical thinking skills?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, there's been so many studies done on this recently, haven't there? And obviously, you have to depends on the game type and all that. There's some people saying it improves your reaction times for certain games, or improves your problem solving skills. And I mean, the number of studies they've done, I mean, it's been quite conclusive in the fact that there are certain games that can improve day-to-day skills or any skills that you might use in the business world as well.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. I mean, I guess that wraps up your story enough, in enough detail for it to be kind of a full encompassment of who you are, right? That's like, that's you. I mean, is there anything else in your story that you think has determined the kind of person that you are today?
I mean, the only other thing I think of is more of an amalgamation of two of the other points we've touched on. The history and my parents. In such a progressive time, in our timeline of history, with all these social reforms going through, I've always maintained to be more of a traditional person. I like those small things where if a traditional act comes out on stage, it's nice to remember those sort of things, like why we used to do it. It's entertaining. I think we should hold on to some of those values, not for any political reasons per se, but just for valuing our background.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point, because I often think, right, I've learned a language, Bengali, as a result of my parents, but I know because of the culture that I've grown up in, I may not be able to pass that language down to my children because I don't speak it often enough for them to hear it often enough to learn it, right? And the same thing goes for all of the cultural events that I go to and all that stuff and all the things that I see and actually benefit from because I'm learning so much about the place that I've grown up, right? India is so vibrant with culture, and the part of India where we're from is equally as interesting. And I only go there as a result of my parents. I often wonder, like, as the world does globalize, right? As we become more connected and we become more like one person because of multiple different factors. I mean, some people say that eventually we'll have one human race because of interbreeding between races, which is crazy. Because right now we have you have Chinese people, you have Indian people, you have English people, you have Americans. One day they may all be the same. But what I'm trying to say with this long monologue is, do you think that you'll be able to pass on your Scottish heritage, let's say, to your kin?
Well, I mean, the Scottish part of my family, has been more readily accepted by me than my siblings, I'd say.
Yeah, I can agree to that.
Yeah, because having an accent such as mine, as all you listeners out there may hear, is not very Scottish. No, but yeah, I'll definitely try to educate them on what their background is, just where their family comes from, what their family's done in the past, because it's always nice to acknowledge what family members have done.
Yeah, but when you look back, it's like, oh, that's what I came from, but is it who you are? Like, I don't necessarily feel like I'm that person. I'm just learning about where I came from.
No, yeah, it doesn't have to define who you are. So, for example, my grandfathers, both of them were in the military. One was fighting in World War II in North Africa as a major in the engineers, and the other one was in the RAF. And he was posted in Singapore for a bit. But that doesn't make me necessarily a military man.
Yeah.
So although your family may be very set in one area of professional business, it doesn't need to define you as a person. It's just I always think it's just sort of nice to understand, acknowledge what they've done, what they've achieved in life. I understand. Some people say pride isn't good, but come on, having a bit of pride, happiness for what your family's achieved is always nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, question: is your family religious?
Well, I don't think. I mean, two of my siblings didn't get confirmed like me and one of my brothers did. So there is a slight split in family, but on the whole, I'd say yeah. With grandparents, uncles, and all that.
Right. Are you religious as a result?
I mean, yes. As a result, yeah, because I grew up in a Christian environment where I'll be attending church every Sunday.
Yeah.
I'll be going to youth groups, and then I made the decision myself to be confirmed. I took the classes, and I was confirmed around the age of 15.
But do you believe in God?
Yes, yeah, I still do.
Yeah, because
But
it's interesting that I keep saying things are interesting. A lot of things are interesting, apparently, but
the world is interesting.
the world is quite interesting. It has to be said. I find myself in a position of questioning more about religion now that I've been exposed to more of them. Like, I spent most of my childhood only having been exposed to one or two religions, right? And even then, like, I went to a Christian school, don't ask why, for my like primary education. And so we'd go to like the church and stuff and do all of that. And I never even listened to it really, because I just was like, this isn't my religion. I don't need to listen. But now I'm listening, right, to what other people and other religions have to say. And in doing so, I'm actually questioning whether or not anyone's preaching the right thing. What is it that makes you still believe in God?
Wow, you really are asking the big questions today, Rishav.
I am. I don't know how I'm coming up with them. Maybe I have them written down.
No, I mean, I wish I could answer the easy way and say 42, but that's not a real option right now. I don't know. It's more of a what would I want to sort of gain from this belief, rather than does he or she or God exist? It's what do I sort of gain from believing so?
What do you gain?
Just the general idea of being a bit nicer.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? I completely agree with that. And the fact is, religion, unlike anything else in the world, has brought billions of people together. Christianity is like 1 billion people believe in Christianity in some form.
I think so. Yeah, that's quite a lot.
What other thing apart from money has brought more than 1 billion people together?
Facebook.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm done. And the Chinese government, that too. They've done that.
Yes.
They did a pretty good job there.
You talk about what's done more to bring people together, but I think I've seen certain this has been brought up in a few films I've watched. I mean, there's a film called Kingdom of Heaven, which stars Orlando Bloom, and there's a character in it portraying a knight's hospitality. It's a film about crusades.
Yeah.
And there was this very, very, very good quote, which I love from it, which, excuse me, anyone watching if I misquote, but the knight says, I've seen too much murder in the eyes of a religious man. I hold no stock in religion. What God wants to see is in here and here. The idea that religion is sort of the man-made construct of faith, and faith should be personal to you as an individual. Which I thought was, quite an interesting concept. It's been repeated lots of times by other people, and sort of the idea that you don't have to be, your faith doesn't have to be dictated by what other people of your religion do. You could have your own personal relationship with your faith and let that dictate your actions, which I think is, a good way to go.
Yeah, I mean that I completely agree with that. Okay, we wouldn't be a young person's podcast had we not talked about the fact. I mean, essentially, we've already spoken about what you have become as a result of all of your past experiences. But now, when you look to the future, right, what do you see? Where do you see yourself going? Because I know, so Charlie studies law, right? Fun degree, I guess. Very, very lucrative industry to what you're working in. Do you see yourself working in that industry?
I definitely can see myself working in that industry in the future, but I have yet to decide on it if it's 100% the route I will be taking. And there's other things which I have been considering, and I was hoping to use this last year of university to sort of pave the way to the future. Make up my mind on what I want to do. Yeah, I mean, if just to pull back the conversation for the younger generation, I just like to put out the message that, as you said earlier, the whole idea of the ladder rungs, some people just end up a bit higher, is the idea that we're very young, we're very early on in our lives, and it's the same to bring it back to swimming as well. the boring stuff is okay sometimes. I find that some people are rushing to get into those higher rungs as fast as possible.
Yeah,
There's
yeah, they are.
nothing wrong with taking that step onto the lowest rung and climbing from there, you know. That could lead to a better career for some people. You know, it's
Well, you hear
some
the
people I
stories of
feel
like CEOs who are like, yeah, I used to work in the mailroom and then I ended up CEO. I worked my
exactly.
way up. Does
Yeah.
that? But I don't know if that culture exists now. Like,
Actually, I have an interesting story for that, Rishav. I was
yeah, yeah,
recent
hit me with it.
I was recently reading some very good articles and interviews online, and there was this one interview, and sorry, but I can't remember the man's name, but he used to work as a high-ranked executive in McDonald's,
Hmm.
and he was talking about the McDonald's construct and business culture. The idea that a lot of their high-ranking executives, you know, like regional managers and that, all of them started off as minimum wage McDonald's workers in the
It's
restaurants.
actually interesting because McDonald's has one of the best leadership programs of
Yeah,
any
exactly.
company.
They
Yeah,
even have a McDonald's university,
yeah, yeah,
which is actually valued quite highly, their degrees.
yeah. Fun fact about McDonald's: if they were to sell all of their retail spaces, they would have more money than their current market value, which is crazy. Like, what? How do you even accomplish that? Anyway, that's aside from the fact. So you still believe that if people wish to work their way up from the bottom, that that's possible?
Definitely, definitely. Because you know, it's the same. It's the same idea with this heavy emphasis on education in the way that you know a lot of young people. I especially felt this myself. You know, when I was choosing universities or choosing A levels, even. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
of what have you studied, where have you studied, and how well did you do? And you know, if those factors don't meet my expectations, you won't get the job.
Mm.
Was sort of my fear, you know, when I was younger.
Yeah.
And you know, I came to realize that, you know, say you want to do a certain job, you have your eyes set on a job, but you feel that I'm not sure, you know, it's a difficult job. Am I up to it?
Hmm.
There's nothing wrong with, you know, taking the slightly slow approach where you start a little bit lower down. You start in like, you know, a different field, you know, one which is maybe a bit more easy on the access. And once you prove yourself, once you know that you can prove yourself, you know, you put in the hours at work, you try your very best. I'm sure you will be noticed. You will be recognized as a hard worker, and you know, move up to the job you sort of want. You know, if I may go on a short monologue here, Rishav,
Please,
this is another
please.
thing I have been looking into recently. It's the idea of the fixed versus growth mindset. You know,
Yeah.
this is a you know coined term by uh, Professor Dweck. And it's the idea that the growth mindset is, you know, one that, you know, evolves, adapts, improves. And they say to encourage a growth mindset in children in education or people in business, rather than praise their ability, you know, instead of saying, wow, you're very smart, you say, wow, you tried really hard. You know, it's the idea that you praise the effort rather than the ability. And apparently, that goes a very long way into improving, you know, a child's development or you know a businessman's outlook in the office rather than a fixed mindset, which is you know the idea that everyone's born with a certain level of intelligence and that's where you're at for the rest of your life. You know, you're set in stone in your position due to your you know born IQ. But growth mindset, you know, argues that no, if you do try hard enough, if you read the material, you take an interest in your studies, you can bet yourself to a level where you will attain the same heights as others, which arguably you know had a better start than you. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think education is a really interesting topic because it is a foundation for everything, not just the fact that those kids are going to one day go get a job and then depending on how they were educated, certain jobs, right? With a mentality that they can either succeed or fail, but also in the way that those people are educated and then go on to do things that affect other people, like voting, right? Because you've got, like, we live in the UK now, right? And as everyone knows, that we went through the whole Brexit situation. You look at the kind of information that people were fed and the kind of mistakes they were making in terms of knowledge. Now, whether or not Brexit is correct or wrong for the UK as a whole is a completely different question. But the problem is people were making decisions based on information that was incorrect. We were, you know, a lot of people were overestimating how much we were actually paying the EU. They were underestimating how much benefit we got from it. They were overestimating the number of EU immigrants, things like that, right? I think there was a study that showed that the UK thought that the percentage of the population that was immigrants from the UK was 12 or 14%. In fact, it was 1%. Right? So completely miscalculated decisions. Do you think that that is a misjudgment on the part of education?
I don't. No, I wouldn't tie this back to education. I mean, yeah, this is a problem that maybe could be remedied if there was, emphasis put on it, during education. But I mean, it's just the idea that it's a more of a life choice you should have, in that if you're hearing information, you should actively go out and research it yourself rather than taking it at face value. And this is why you have this whole recent tide of, combating fake news, so to speak.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to get.
Which has been a huge thing. And as recent studies have shown, UK is the only country apart from China which would, by survey, seem to advocate internet regulation to combat fake news.
Mm-hmm.
I think the margin is very narrow margin.
That's like yeah, they don't even let Facebook there. So
exactly, and I mean, it was a narrow margin. I think it was only about 53% of the survey said they would accept more regulation. But in the UK, that's still quite a phenomenal, sort of a choice to make.
Yeah, I mean, it is a big deal. If you think about the number of people who have active access to the internet, and as a result are using the internet in certain ways, right? They're basically saying, I want to restrict myself on the number of websites that I'm able to see. But then the real question is, like, how do you decide then what is fake news, what is not fake news, what is just a mistake on someone's research versus are they trying to manipulate kind of the media perspective on a certain topic? It's more difficult than I think people take it at face value too,
Oh yeah, I mean, this is going to be a situation which I imagine carry on for quite a long time in terms of its development and whether or not this ever gets curbed. Like sifting between real news, fake news, it's going to be. I'm not the expert. I can't really give too much of a judgment on this, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but I mean, let it be said that most of the articles that we read right now, or at least some of them, are written by a computer.
Yeah, but
So yeah, I mean, if it's fed the wrong information, then maybe the result of fake news is simply the fact that it is doing just that. But okay, anyway, moving on from that, I guess we came on to the discussion about looking into the future and the fact that you do believe that you can actually move up the ladder no matter where you start.
Yeah.
Because I do feel, yeah, I mean, I agree with you that there is a certain rush that everyone has, at least the environments that we're growing up in, the environments we've grown up in, is the fact that it's like, okay, I'm out of uni, got to get a good job at a good firm, I've got to get high, got to be director by 25, got to be CEO by 29. And it's that just doesn't happen. Like, for the majority of the world, everyone lives in a certain way. And I'm not going to say that I've distanced myself from that. I'm still under the same mentality. I still believe that I could be a CEO at 29. For what company, I do not know. And why I think I'm successful enough to be a CEO at 29, I also don't know.
Well, I mean, I could maybe answer that. I think it's partly because some of the TV shows out there. I mean, just for example, Dragon's Den, Shark Tank. I think those do have an influence on young people in the way that they see these people come along with their ideas and get offered hundreds of thousands of dollars just for like someone else to have a part of them.
Yeah,
it's the age-old idea of a get-rich-quick scheme.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
I have a cunning plan, said Baldric, that sort of thing.
Well, the thing is, I've never seen. Well, I haven't necessarily looked, but I've never seen those ones from like either The Apprentice, because recently Apprentice has been doing a very entrepreneurship-focused ending, and then you have Dragon's Den, Shark Tank. I have heard, but Dragon's Den, Apprentice, I haven't seen those businesses blow up to stuff that I actually see on the street. You know what I mean? Like, where are they?
Yeah.
Because if 90% of businesses fail, then surely Alan Sugar's is like, he's surely flipped, a few of them, like at least 3 of his businesses out of 12 have been successful, let's say, given. What happened to the other 9? Because if 90% of businesses fail, they must have failed, right? Statistically.
Yeah, I mean,
but then, it's mentored by him, so I'm gonna stop with that one. But
yeah,
I mean, that is something to think about. But I've read this. So LinkedIn boosted a post. And it's interesting because obviously they boost it specifically to certain people who do certain things on the site because they're tracking everything, right? And they showed this guy who is now the CFO of Kraft Foods, I think. I don't want you to quote me on that because I don't know. But he's 29.
Oof.
I'll try and find him. I'll link it in the comments below. But 29-year-old CFO of a publicly traded company, something like that.
Yeah, that is pretty ridiculous.
It is, right? But and that just goes to show that kind of dream to kind of accelerate your life can happen.
Yeah, I mean, like, for anyone listening and may think what I'm saying is it's impossible to jump up the ladder. No, there are chances to do it. It's just, I think it just needs to be accepted that it doesn't happen to everyone.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. But yeah, final question then to wrap up the evening. Motivating yourself. I laugh because I personally have a history of quitting many things, and one of those things that I quit I happened to do with Charlie, which was swimming. When we were swimming at the height of our kind of training scheme, what is it apart from your mum pushing you out of bed that forced you into the pool? What was it? What was that mentality?
I think the main other factor that sort of kept me going on the swimming path for so long was not falling behind other swimmers, plain and simple. You know, when I got into the pool for a race, I didn't want to be coming last. I didn't want to come anywhere near last. I wanted to be able to, you know, be at the front in the general front group at least. It's just that drive not to lose, really.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, right, even in training, like I said, I felt demoralized when people would take me over, even when we were doing workout or warm up or warm down sets, right? When it didn't matter how fast you swam, it was like you low key kind of got pissed off.
You're still watching the other people in the other lanes out the corner of your eye thinking, they're going a bit faster. I'll speed up a little bit. Even if it's, warm down, you'll still be looking at other people.
But in the race itself, I definitely thought the closing miles was better because when I started watching people, I actually slowed down because I was thinking, okay, is this guy going faster than me? Oh, is this guy going faster than me? Just shut your eyes and swim. You know what
I mean? That's a very good idea. I mean, me personally, I sort of fed off my own anger in the way that I was. If I saw someone out the corner of my eye, an inch ahead of me, I would be furious at myself. I'd be so angry at myself. I'd be like, "That's it. No more oxygen for you for the next 50 meters until you overtake them." You know, I'll be telling myself, you're not allowed to breathe until you get ahead of them. Then you can take a breath and carry on.
Yeah, completely. Apart from Lucas Menkov, who was born as a fish.
Yeah, no, I could not hold a candle to him, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, but like you actually. So you're saying that you punished yourself when you realized you weren't good enough, and that punishment drove you further.
Well, when you put it that way, I guess so. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, when you rid yourself of oxygen, you're ridding yourself of the one thing that keeps you alive. So you better downswim.
Yeah, it's a swim or drown scenario.
Yeah. Oh, right. Well, I guess we covered a lot of stuff in this podcast. Very interesting conversation. I'm really glad we did this.
Oh yeah, it's been great. It's been great. Yeah. I'm just hoping that those listening will take away at least something I've said and not think it's all complete rubbish.
Well, yeah, let's hope that. And same goes for me. Obviously, I'm chatting rubbish every week. So tune in next week for another episode of Rishav talking unnecessarily with no evidence. But yeah, so for those listening, for those watching, thank you very much for joining Charlie and myself. Next week, you'll be joined by Ryan and me, hopefully. Look out on Facebook for shorter clips if you're interested. We're going to get an Instagram running for quotes and stuff like that, just so you can keep thinking about the ideas that we're sharing. There's some extra videos underway. There's a new project that we're working on because we think we want to ramp up the kind of people that the number of people we're talking to, because honestly, I've had a great time doing these conversations. I hope you've had a great time listening to them. And Charlie, I guess as a guest, I hope you had a great time being part of it.
Of course.
So yeah, thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I will hopefully see you next week.